Hi, welcome back to Way to Eat, a platform dedicated to empowering you with nutrition knowledge so that you can make better food choices and improve your eating habits for a better life. So, in the spirit of leaving no one behind, today we've decided to talk about nutrition or feeding for children with disabilities or persons with disabilities. Now, I've said children with disabilities, and it's important that we say it right. It is not children living with disabilities or children who are differently abled. The correct term is children with disabilities or persons with disabilities. I have been corrected several times by experts in this field. And so I think I got it right, and it's important that we all do. And there are different kinds of disabilities: intellectual disability, there's autism, there's physical disability, hearing disability, vision disability, and so on and so forth. But to be more specific today, I want us to look at children, especially with disabilities. They are more vulnerable. According to evidence from a Spoon Foundation that did a mini research, so to speak, on children living in orphanages and other residential areas, looking at what is their nutritional status, and they found that 68% of them actually are chronically or were chronically malnourished. So being a mom with a child who is said to be autistic as well, I felt it is important that we talk about it. And I also want to share my experiences as to how I feed my child. But today I want us to especially focus on children with cerebral palsy, what we call CP, children with CP, and a little bit on children with autism. So when it comes to children with cerebral palsy, first of all, is a condition where the muscles at test because of whatever may have happened during pregnancy or at birth. It could have been meningitis, it could have been whatever be the case that has led to the child having CP. It really results in the child having tense muscles. The child is constantly tense. Imagine flexing your muscles, eh? Now, you are doing it only for that moment. Now, imagine a child who is constantly tensed. So basically, one, you are using up a lot of energy because to flex your muscles, it requires you to use up a lot of energy. And not only energy, but also a lot of nutrients. And so that in itself is what may result in children with CP being malnourished, especially if their energy and the nutrients being utilized are not replenished. So you see most of these children being very thin, very poor muscle tone, very skinny. And when you compare the age of the child to the weight that they have, and it's not correlating at all, that in itself is a red flag. And that's possibly why we are seeing more and more children with CP who could be malnourished. It is important that you manage this child correctly, that you show this child love before even food. Love, care, patience, trust. They think, they see, they feel, they can sense. And so it's important that we ensure that the environment is good. We call that active feeding. So when it's time to eat, show them love, show them care, be patient, be relaxed. Okay? And then secondly, also the positioning. How is this child positioned? Mind you, I've said these are children who have tensed muscles. You cannot feed in such a situation. So if a child has the tendency, which is the case I think for most children with CP, they tend to flex backwards. They tend to want to be like, in a straight position like a plank. And so during feeding, unfortunately, they cannot be in that position. And that is why physiotherapy is important. If a child like that does not undergo physiotherapy, it makes feeding difficult. As they are growing, their muscles become harder and harder, and they are not as flexible as that of a young child. And so it's much easier when they are younger to help them with some good therapy, to relax muscles, to help them also begin to move or explore the other muscles that may be dormant. And that also helps to facilitate feeding. So basically, you make my job as a nutritionist much easier when the child is at least undergoing physiotherapy. If the child is doing good physiotherapy, they should be able to do one or two things. And so when it comes to feeding, we do not look at the age of the child, but we look at the developmental capabilities of the child. So we are going to look at what foods to give this child based on the developmental abilities. And that is why physiotherapy is important, because it's the physiotherapy that will decide or that will show you what the child can do and cannot do yet. And there's need to have incremental goals where we say, okay, now the child is at this stage, the child can rotate the head now, or the child can move these muscles, the child can roll the tongue. And so, oh, it's these foods that you give. So positioning the child would mean, first of all, you start by ensuring that they are seated comfortably. Of course, there are special chairs that can facilitate that. But if you do not have those special chairs at home, you can still use what you have around you. So the child should be seated at least upright, 90 degrees the trunk, and the bottom makes a 90-degree angle. And that can be ensured by tying. Remember I said some of them want to flex back, and it is not on purpose. It's reflex. They just want to do that. Their bodies just want to tilt back like that. So to avoid that, you may want to take something like a scarf or a towel to tie them, or ichitenge. You push them to the chair, tie them around the chair so that that tendency to flex back reduces. And then also you then move to the trunk. You make sure that the trunk, in as much as you've tied the pelvic, the trunk may be tilting back. So you also want to ensure that the shoulder area is tied to the back of the chair, right? So you press the child's shoulders at the back of the chair, and you may also want to tie another chitenge against the chair. And then when the trunk and the pelvic are well aligned, and then now you move to the legs. The legs may be wanting to tilt back as well. And so you ensure that you put even a crate. If the legs are dangling or the feet are dangling, you make sure that you put a crate so that they are resting somewhere comfortably. And then when that is done, you then come to the head. And that's where you now make sure that the head is well aligned. So most of them want to tilt either this way or that way. And so you want to make sure that the head is right. And that can be done through your hand. Some, depending on the age of the child, you may want to wrap your hand around their hip so that you lock their head with your arm, and so that movement is limited, and so they are well aligned. Sometimes we are shoving food in their mouths, eat, and you do not know how hard it is to swallow. So right now, press pause, tilt your head like that, turn your head back, and just swallow saliva. Saliva alone, it's difficult. It's not impossible, but it takes time. Yeah? It's hard. So imagine now a child who has those tense muscles and like that and has to swallow at your pace. And see, this is why patience is very important. And so once that is done, we make sure the head is straight like this and not like that, because it's much difficult to swallow like this. But unfortunately, we leave these children, we don't take them to physiotherapy, and they remain like that, and we want to feed them in this position. You are busy giving Muku spoon if you could yoku feed a pona. How are you and you just, and the child is getting very little. You find that ni porridge just sorty. That is even, the fact that the porridge is not even enough. Then on top of that, enough in terms of nutrients, of course. Then on top of that, the child is not even getting that porridge because it's all spilling out of the mouth because of the poor positioning. And so you want to make sure the head is straight so that swallowing is much easier. And then also locking the jaws. You can even put pillows. Pillow here, pillow there. And also it's important that you face your child. So if it's not a child that you can hold like this and have that face-to-face contact, then it's a child who is seated on a chair, pillow here, pillow there, and you, the caregiver, you are looking at a child face to face so that you also, get to see the cues that they give. When they are full, when they are choking, when they are, we see tears coming out of the child's eyes, things are not okay. Responsive feeding is where you are there watching the child, encouraging the child to eat. Do you want one more? Can you do one more? The last one, please. All that is active feeding. It's encouraging the child. Before we even talk about what to feed, this is the most important part of feeding a child to the disability, ensuring that they are well positioned. And then finally, the jaw. If it's a mouth that is bent, try to, even when you're putting food in the mouth, try to control. Control also the closing of the mouth, because it's not everyone or all children who are able to close their mouths. Some can't close their mouths because the muscles around the jaws are weak. And so you find that a child has food and is like this. So assist the child to close and to swallow. The child may be able to swallow but not close the mouth. So allow that. You have to be there to close the mouth, allow the child to swallow, and then that. Okay, so now let's come to what foods to give this child. Of course, they can eat a lot of foods that we already eat. And again, we still have to look at the 6 food groups. And I just want to give you some 5 examples maybe under each food group that you can give the child. Okay, these are just examples. So when it comes to feeding our children with CP, you want to focus on foods that are of the right texture. The base is always something starchy, something that gives you energy. The so-called, in the past we used to say energy-giving foods, but it's the starchy foods that I'm talking about, foods that can give us a lot of carbohydrates because they need it. Their muscles are always tense, their muscles are always demanding for energy. That should be your base, energy, but not energy alone. They too need to thrive, and so they need nutrients. The reason why majority are chronically malnourished is most likely due to the lack of protein, as well as the lack of micronutrients like iron and vitamin A. And so you want to avoid that by ensuring that there's a good balance of energy as well as nutrients. So your base should always be the starchy foods, which would be like maize meal flour, or rice flour. Again, I'm looking at the texture of the food, and I'm looking at a child who is at the puree stage. So foods that are porridge like that, a child does not need much chewing to do, maybe no chewing at all. Preferably the unrefined. I think we have this tendency of saying breakfast meal is for children. They can eat that, but it's the adults that should eat roller and so forth. No, it's the whole family that should eat like that. So preferably the unrefined because they are richer in B vitamins, as well as rice. Even polished rice is fine. Brown rice is fine, which you can grind. Potatoes, cassava, oats as well can be blended into finer powder to make forage that they can consume because oats are excellent in fiber, both soluble and insoluble. And so you want that kind of base. Now that is just a base. Don't make oatmeal porridge and then you just put sugar and salt and that is it. No, you want to enrich it. Now the next step is to add nutrients. So what are those foods that have more nutrients? They may have less energy, but they have a lot more nutrients. So it will be your vegetables. For example, vegetables like spinach. They have vegetables, and these are soft vegetables. You do not want the stringy vegetables like mareb, bakadembula. All those stringy things can cause choking. And also because it is difficult to get them really thin. Unless you're a really good chopper, you can make them into tiny pieces, but even those tiny pieces can easily get into the airways and cause a child with CP to choke. Now, other challenges that you may face with feeding children with CP is what we call tongue thrust. So the child moves the tongue in and out, so has poor tongue control. The child is unable to roll the tongue within the mouth, and so the tongue just moves back and forth, back and forth. So the challenge with that is that the child is ingesting very little food, and it takes longer to feed such a child. One thing that you can do to assist such a child is to gently place an empty spoon on the tongue. So after you've put food in the mouth, let's say banana puree or mashed pawpaw, which I want you to try, by the way, mashed pawpaw with a bit of milk, you can gently place the spoon onto the child's lower lip and allow or restrict that tongue from moving back and forth. That way you encourage the child to swallow food. Or even when swallowing takes place, there could be instances where there is still some food left in the mouth. So the child did not completely swallow what you gave. And so there's still pieces of food that you can see around the teeth from the tongue. And so you still have to wait for that food to be swallowed before you can give the next spoon. So how do you do that? A trick is to get another empty spoon. Pretend as though you have taken another scoop of food and put the spoon back in the mouth. And tell the child, okay, here, can you swallow? And that swallowing reflex again happens to allow the child to swallow the remaining food. It requires a lot of patience, but I know you can do it. So another challenge though is also on what spoon to use, because there are some children that have what we call a tonic bite. Now, this is a bite that once the child has closed the mouth, the muscles tighten and it's very difficult for the child to release the mouth again. It is not kadara. It is not, the child's will that they bite. They bite you like that. And you need to understand that as a caregiver, it's not the child trying to say, I hate you. It's not the child being difficult or fussy. It just happens. Okay, they have no control of their mouth muscles. They tense up involuntarily. They let go from time to time and then tense up again. And they have no control of that because of the condition. And so you need to understand that. And so one way to deal with it is to use the correct spoon. A metal spoon is definitely not the right spoon for a child who has tonic bite. You know why? Because this metal spoon is quite tough. Imagine even you biting really hard on this spoon. You can easily chip your teeth. And so that can result in the child chipping their teeth. And, it's quite, even thinking about biting into a metal for me gives me goosebumps. And so this is not a right tool for a child who has a tonic bite. This is also not a right tool for a child who has a tonic bite because it is too soft. It is very easy for this to break. Imagine a child who has a super bite and when they bite into the spoon, it can easily, snap. And when this snaps, this is actually a much softer spoon, but there are those that are a bit rigid and when it snaps, it can break into, tiny pieces which the child can actually ingest and cause choking. We shouldn't take choking lightly. When a child chokes, it's a serious sign of distress. And so that should not be happening too often. Don't take it lightly. Because when choking happens, what happens is that there is that flap. Remember from your biology, it covers the windpipe and allows for food to slide into the stomach, so the esophagus. And so now when a child has that opening, it now goes, instead of going into the esophagus, it now goes into the lungs. Of course, there are children who they tense up right before a meal. Sometimes it could be that they are not happy with the food, or sometimes it could be that it just happens involuntarily. You maybe have to wait for some time for them to relax before you feed. But when that happens, it's not now time for you, the caregiver, to slap the child or pinch the child so that the child can cry and open the mouth, let out a cry, and then you now use that opportunity to force food into the mouth. That I see being done even with typical children. That is not the right way to feed any child. Don't wait for them while they are crying, while they are choking, and for you to now shove food in the mouth because it will go in the wrong pipe. And when it goes in the windpipe now, it causes choking. And if the child cannot cough out the food quickly, it continues going down. And when it goes down, it goes in the lungs. And it starts to rot in the lungs. And that's how even when they have good hygiene, you've brushed their teeth, they are still releasing bad breath. When they go, you can still smell like rotten food and, like they haven't brushed their teeth for days. But that's only because food has been going in the windpipe and you have been ignoring it. That can unfortunately cause death and a number of other lung complications. And the good sign that there is maybe food in the lungs or in the airways is how the child is breathing. So when you are hearing that wheeze, a wet kind of voice or a wet kind of breathing, that is not a good sign. That is a sign that there could be food in the airways. And also constant coughing, heavy breathing where the child has to gasp for air all the time. That is not a good sign. Constant choking as well. From time to time, the child will be playing and that could be the body reacting to that food that is in the airways. Because food is not supposed to be airways. And so the body will try by all means to push it up. So each time the child coughs, it's the body saying, this is not supposed to be here. But then if the cough is not, strong enough to remove that, it's important that you go to your health facility, express this concern to your healthcare worker and say, my child has this kind of breathing. Am I okay? Is the child okay? What can be done? Let them do whatever they can to remove that stuff from the child's airways. Okay, so the right spoon though to use is a spoon that has a hard plastic that cannot easily snap. You can get these spoons, I think, in most home, essential places. They do have such spoons. Plastic that the child, even when the child bites into it, they are not going to chip their teeth, or they are not going to snap it into pieces and swallow. So hard plastics like this are best. They will not snap easily. So these, not for a child with CP, but these are much better. Another thing that you need to remember is that they also need to drink. After a meal, they need to take some water, they need to take maybe milk for a snack, or anything liquid, juice as well that they can take. But then how do you feed that child juice? The type of cup that you use is also important. If it's a cup that when the child tilts to the mouth, it covers the nose as well, you do not know what's happening in the cup. And so the child's nostrils could be touching the liquid. And when the child inhales, what happens? Straight through the nose into the windpipe, and it's a painful experience. I'm sure even you at some point may have snorted some water through the nose. How is that feeling? It feels like it goes through the brain, and it disturbs the brain and things like that. And it's a horrible feeling. And so to be safer, this is a simple cup that I made. You can cut the other side. Either you use a colorless cup, it can be a full cup because you're able to see how the child is drinking. Or it can be a normal standard cup that you cut out like this. And this can be a cup just for that particular child, so that as the child is drinking, and the child is not drinking from this end, by the way, the child is drinking from the upper end. This lower part is just to allow the nose to sit comfortably and also not touch the liquid in the cup. So you're able to allow the child to breathe as they are sipping on whatever they are sipping. These are another or simple ways in which we can facilitate feeding for children with CP. So I hope this information has been helpful. I hope these are points that we can easily implement in our homes, at our orphanages with our children, or at our schools if you are a school that takes care of children with disabilities. Now, looking at or talking about schools with children with disabilities, I know of one Taka Fen Child Care Foundation that looks into taking care of children with disabilities. Now, this is a brilliant initiative because a number of our children with disabilities struggle to find schools. So if you find it in your heart to assist children with disabilities at Taka Fen, please call the number below. Mr. Mwata is the founder of this school. It has been in existence for some time, but the only challenge is that they have a piece of land where they can actually build their own school. But unfortunately, they need the resources to pay off their land and start the building process. I would like to thank the Spoon Foundation. I would also like to thank Access to Health Zambia for having trained a number of us government staff on how to manage this situation nutritionally. At different health facilities in Zambia, we do have nutritionists. We do have an app called Count Me In, specifically for children with disabilities that tracks them. So you get your child registered. You can inbox me and I can facilitate for you to reach out to a physiotherapist or a nutritionist who handles the Count Me In app, and they can have your child registered on the app, and then this child will be followed through. They'll tell you when the next appointment is. They'll tell you the developmental stage of the child. They'll tell you what physiotherapy exercises you can do. So, hey, let's engage. So with that said, I hope you learned a thing or two. Until next time, bye-bye.